Welcome, everyone. You're listening to Nephology, the podcast dedicated to crypto, accounting, business, finance, and much, much more. I'm Joe David, the founder of Nephos Group in Minor. Please note that all conversations recorded are professional opinions, and if you'd like to know more or gain support, please reach out to the team directly. Now on to the next episode. Hello everyone, welcome to the latest episode of the Nephology podcast. I'm delighted to welcome Manpreet to the episode today. How are you, Manpreet?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me today.
No, thank you for coming on. I'm really excited to talk to you about kind of VARA and the regulatory landscape in the UAE, because it's a question that we get asked quite a lot by clients. I think it's something that's becoming more and more prevalent here, where VARA are trying to make sure that they are across the market as much as possible. So yeah, I think it's going to be a really interesting conversation for the viewers and listeners. So why don't we start with a quick background introduction into you, what brought you here, Dubai, but also what you've done in the digital asset space.
Okay, sure. So again, thanks a lot for having me today. So my background, I was in technical project program management in the UK, working with the Big Four, and was introduced to VARA at the time through a colleague. I was very much doing a bit of everything across program management, across various industries. So VARA was looking for somebody to be a similar kind of person across everything, a bit of everything, can kind of help get things going. So I was introduced to VARA in May 22, and that is effectively what also brought me to Dubai.
Okay.
Lock, stock and barrel, moved to Dubai in May 22. And my role initially, my background, my whole introduction to virtual assets is VARA.
Okay.
I didn't really know a lot about virtual assets at that time. And I really did learn on the job from my peers, my colleagues, about what virtual assets are, what are the different kind of actual assets that exist, how they work.
Yeah.
So I was very much quite a novice in full transparency and honesty.
Yeah, no, was that in VARA, was that something that I'm not saying this in a bad way, but was that quite prevalent across VARA initially, that they were trying to bring in good people, but not crypto?
And there were a number of the team were experienced in crypto,
Okay.
virtual assets, policy, technology, across the board, had good ecosystem knowledge and contacts. And most of the team came from other jurisdictions, though.
Okay.
So most of us were from other countries and have been brought in at the time to work with the team at VARA. So we all brought something different.
Yeah.
You'll definitely see today that the team comes from a strong regulatory background. A lot of the colleagues that are there today have strong regulatory experience, VA experience. So they bring something slightly different to the team.
Again, from around the world still.
Yeah, different locations. I'm trying to think now. Obviously myself, UK, Asia, etc. So yeah, some different kind of across the board.
Yeah,
experience.
Nice. How did you, from, I guess, a non-crypto virtual assets background, how did you then kind of find that transition from the non-crypto VA space into quite a technical space in the kind of crypto world? How did you find that?
So fortunately, my role was more operational.
Okay.
So where I worked with the virtual asset service providers to kind of introduce them to VARA, what the process was. Because when I joined, VARA was running a minimal viable product program at that time for a small cohort of approximately 50 VASPs that wanted to come to the region, wanted to get licensed within Dubai for virtual asset activities. Okay. So I was kind of helping them along that process. So what the then MVP program was. So it was mostly operational things as well, like helping with recruitment, getting the landing page set up, the entity itself set up as a regulator, because everybody needs to have a regulatory commercial license, office set up. So I was very hands-on in that sense from a project management point of view. But when it became more technical to the licensing side of things, then yeah, it was a transition, because I come from a Big Four background where there's a lot of red tape in the UK, even to onboard a client just on a normal digital transformation data program. There's a lot of red tape to onboard a client. Whereas though with this with the virtual asset industry, there was a lot of learning as we were going as well. What works well, taking knowledge and support and guidance from industry professionals at the time. So working with those colleagues, we were working with DLA Piper, PwC at the time, and they were really helping us shape what VARA was going to be from a licensing perspective and a regulatory perspective. So it was quite different because you have to use a completely different mindset. Also, the region itself as well. So I hadn't worked in the region before.
Yeah,
so communication here is very different. It's 24/7. It's WhatsApp. I'm a typical project manager, very responsive.
Yeah.
So I would be boom, boom, boom responding, but not taking 5 seconds to be like, okay, this is different.
Yeah.
So replying to people differently and approaching it differently. So there was a lot of learning for me, not just from a virtual assets perspective, but from a regional perspective as well.
Yeah,
and also
sense.
Working under VARA, we were part of the Dubai World Trade Center wider family.
Yeah.
And I call it a family because there's still, when I see everybody from DWTC, they're very friendly. It's like we've known each other for years. So there was also that learning of how they do things and then implementing and working alongside them to get things done.
So is VARA connected to DWTC?
So DWTC is a commercial free zone. Obviously, we know Dubai World Trade Center as well as the largest exhibition space as well within the UAE. But the connection is that VARA sits within the Dubai World Trade Center office location, and there's that license from a commercial point of view as well.
But you can get a license outside of DWTC and still have a VARA.
Yes, you can. License. So a number of free zones and Dubai mainland do support VASPs with incorporating their commercial entity.
Okay. Yeah, so it's despite they sit in there, they still
of course. So like broadly. DMCC, IFSA, Maidan are all involved with the VARA process.
Right. And just for clarity as well, for those that don't know, VARA is a Dubai only, not a UAE-wide initiative, right?
So it's a Dubai Virtual Asset Regulatory Authority. The only free zone that they don't have jurisdiction over is the DIFC. Okay. So all the other free zones and Dubai mainland VARA covers, but not DIFC. They're their own standard. They're regulated standalone.
Yeah, to their own. And does that mean that VARA has an overarching kind of like yes or no in certain things where, a free zone, I'm making this up, but let's say DMCC says we're going to license ABC, but if VARA say no for whatever reason, do they have an overarching kind of like decision making on that, or can the free zone make a decision without VARA? How does that play out?
When it comes to company incorporation, so they're two separate processes and they run in parallel at a certain point.
Yeah.
So I'm a VASP. I want to set up in Dubai. I go through my selection process and I select, for example, DMCC, for argument's sake, or DWTC. It's the same with both, really. You start your company incorporation. They will do their own due diligence. They have their own background checks that they do on UBOs, GMs, the key personnel that are going to be involved, shareholders in that entity. So they will make a decision themselves first as to whether or not everybody passes all their due diligence. Are they clear? There'll also be an exercise where they'll be asking you, what is it you're doing? So you'll present to your free zone a high-level business plan. If you mention that you're obviously doing a virtual asset, then they will say, okay, that's fine, but you're going to be introduced to the VARA process at that point. The only thing is, it's not a case of if VARA say we're not licensing, ultimately they would not be able to do the virtual asset activity.
Yeah, without VARA.
If that company decides, okay, right, we're not going to now go for a virtual asset activity, we want to be a prop trader, for example, we're not going to go for an exchange, we're going to stay within the volumes, the stipulated volumes, and we're going for prop trading, then that is a DMCC choice because it's a DMCC it's a business activity that they can apply for with DMCC.
Yeah, so in principle, yes, VARA have an overarching yes or no over the if
it's
VARA,
a digital asset, it's a virtual asset activity.
But then that company could then say, okay, that's fine, we won't do that part, we'll do this part, and then DMCC.
Then they go through that process with DMCC, whatever incorporation they need to from a non-VA point of view.
Yeah, fine. And the incorporation, can it be complete? I assume it can't be completed if we're going down the VARA route until VARA's final kind of sign off and.
So with company incorporation and VARA, Once you've registered with the commercial free zone, you go through your due diligence. You then start the VARA process. So the phase one basically is your completing the VARA initial disclosure questionnaire. So when you complete the initial disclosure questionnaire, you submit that to VARA. VARA will do their due diligence on what you have submitted, information you've provided, and then they will provide you with an approval to incorporate. Okay. So the approval to incorporate is shared with your commercial free zone, at which point they will give you a license to operate, but not you cannot do your activity. Yeah. What you can do is set up your entity. You can get your office space, your visa allocation, hire who you need, your bank account, your auditors, your insurance, all the relevant elements to complete your VARA application. You can get in place.
And that's what I was
it's almost like operational readiness.
Yeah, and that's what I was kind of getting at, was that I guess if you had to wait for VARA's final yes to get your final incorporation piece, then there's a lot of bits in between that. And there's also costs that are being incurred and all these sorts of things that people would then say, how do I manage all of that if I can't house it somewhere?
Yeah.
So that's useful to know. And one thing that we should probably wind back slightly here, because I've jumped a little bit from VARA and you being there, but obviously you're not at VARA now.
I'm not.
We should make that part clear. And you now have a kind of consulting firm that helps firms through that. So maybe jumping back slightly before we dive into the technical. No tell us a little bit about, you left VARA, and then I say why if you don't want to say why, that's fine. And then what you do now.
Okay, so I was with VARA for about 18 months and had the opportunity, obviously, had kind of grown my rapport with the ecosystem and a number of kind of companies. And Cander Group, DMCC, I'd known since I joined VARA, actually. So the founders, Luke and Sam, just generally through the ecosystem, had been very supportive, always wanting to introduce candidates to VARA as well. So my role at VARA had kind of gone from being very reactive to BAU. And, I'm the kind of person who likes to be very busy and doing this and that. So I had made the choice, with the consent and support of my VARA colleagues at the time, to transition out. And that was when Cander approached me with an opportunity. So Luke and Sam had seen what I knew what I do, and I launched for them in February last year. So I've just reached my 1 year anniversary with Cander to launch their licensing and compliance division. So Cander Consulting is what it is. It's a consulting company. We have different pillars. So we have Cander Consulting, licensing and compliance, and we also have HR, which my colleague Ian heads up. So each of us focus on our specific areas. We support from a licensing perspective. It doesn't just have to be VARA. We do support ADGM applications, anything to do with DFSA, ESCA, central bank. So we are supporting clients across that.
So anything financial, regulatory?
Correct, yes. And then the compliance piece is that we support with the document drafting. We do document QA. It really does depend on what the client needs. So what we tend to do with our clients is we really, first of all, understand who are they? What is it they actually want to do? And it's that whole saying, does it actually do what it says on the tin?
Yeah.
And more often than that, not. So our job initially is to really help the client make sure that they are going to the right regulator for them, that they understand the level of input that they're going to need to give, because even if it's not just VARA, all the regulators have a high level of due diligence in the region, which I think speaks really highly about the region itself. VARA definitely have upped the bar, I think, with what they're asking for. We often, during my tenure at VARA, but also now, I do find clients say, oh, wow, but we didn't have to submit that for so-and-so regulator. But we're like, this is virtual assets. They are the only regulator that just regulate virtual assets. It's a completely different nature and kind of industry, right? So it requires a lot more rigor. So we do explain to our clients there's a lot of input required from them. It isn't a case of you can just outsource it. Someone gives you an application, you submit it, because VARA like to be involved with the client. They like to know who the client is, who's the compliance officer, who's your general manager on the ground. They become part of this ecosystem that's been built in Dubai today that very much exists. And you do end up then start networking and being part of that. So you we take them on a journey before we even put pen to paper. And then once we're confirmed on and we validate with them what are the activities they're going for with the regulator, we then start the process. And like I said, there's that 2-step process then with VARA. So Cander Group's a fintech recruitment company, been in the region for 8 years, launched in Saudi last year as well. And the guys really have that focus on the fintech side. Samalik, when they first started, set up the team in ADGM, and very much integrated in the ecosystem across the VA fintech space. So with the consulting arm, they were getting a lot of requirements to support virtual asset service providers, not just from a recruitment perspective, but we are supporting ex-VASP and we need these consultants to come in and write the documentation. So it kind of worked hand in hand. It was a great kind of partnership together.
Yeah, makes sense.
With them. And so we're on the journey with a number of clients. We're doing different things with clients though. So there's the VARA process, which, we're at different stages with our clients. We've got clients that we're working with at the moment so they've developed their application themselves.
Okay.
So they've got the right people in-house, but they want to validate what they've submitted is in line with the regulations. So we also do a QA process. We do a gap analysis and help them align their application with the requirements before submission to VARA. We can also do the validation of the AML, CFT, and provide that legal sign-off as well. And then obviously there's other things like fit and proper preparation. So VARA are now interviewing, and ADGM already do. They interview key personnel, so it's helping them prep for those interviews. Banking introductions,
I was
audit,
going to ask you about banking.
accounting, which is where our paths crossed. So the point for us to offer this was we don't want them to have to go everywhere and anywhere and just go around the houses. I love the region. I love Dubai, but it's never straight. And I, being on the other side of that with the VASPs in the early days, learned a lot that we really do need to kind of put it into one pack and just help them along. And it is hand-holding in a sense. A lot of it, once they've built that relationship, I'm happy to hand it over, you go do your thing. But just helping them connect the dots in the region, a one-stop shop, make it a lot easier. Speaking different languages always helps as well, because 9 times out of 10, the other person on the other end of the phone, we're not talking English. We're talking Hindi, Urdu, Punjabi. I'm not an Arabic speaker yet. I really want to get that feather under my cap.
I want to learn that as well, actually.
Full transparency, it isn't as easy. So we try and offer that kind of, we're an extension of their team basically, rather than consultants.
And I like that a lot. And I think the other point here is that for some people that go, well, I don't want somebody to handhold me through the whole process, I've got people in-house that can do X, Y and Z. Actually, that still is fine, because you guys, like you say, can do a QA process towards the end, or during the process, or whatever. So I think that's super important as well, that you don't have to handhold the whole process.
No, exactly.
And I think for some entities, I'm sure, especially in the early days when they were looking at, a Binance or even recently an OKX and people like that, right? They're huge organisations, so they're likely to have an internal team on the kind of regulatory side and things like that. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they don't need an expert in the region to help them.
Definitely from a global perspective, the global players that came to the table in the early days, they all had really strong compliance teams globally, and then form their teams here locally. But they did it in partnership with local partners. We've got the strong law firms, Norton Rose Fulbright, Neo Legal, Simmons & Simmons, who I've worked with in process on different applications, different stages. You've got your other consultants as well in the region. So everybody needed someone's help along the way at some point, if not end to end. But that end piece is also a really vital kind of offering now. Because like you say, you're in the region, there's obviously a cost implication. You're not operational yet. So then there's, how can we streamline this and make it efficient and effective?
And it's also not cheap to operate a business here, but I mean that in the sense of, if you are going to go through a process and it's going to take you 18 months to do it on your own, versus, I'm making this up, but 12 months to do it, if you say, you've also got to remember that the office space is not cheap. So
Yeah.
that is an extra 6 months. And
Yeah.
I'm making those timescales up, obviously, but like 6 months of that extra 6 months of insurance you didn't need because you weren't doing this. And, so there's all those things as well that if you do it yourself, it can take that little bit longer, and it all
we help
adds
people
up.
like map that, like when's the right time to start the banking, when's the right time to start your insurance, your audit conversations, if they need to onboard tech providers. So our team, our SMEs, have really strong relationships across globally in the industry. So they're able to leverage, like they can recommend based on what the client's doing in their business model, who's the right partner for you. The recommendations at the end of the day, but it gives them a starting point if they don't have it.
And they can make a choice from there as to which partner
and then they
want
can
to
look
work
at the
with.
cost implication and how soon do they need to onboard them and et cetera, in line with the relevant licensing requirements.
And jumping into the kind of the dreaded B word, which is banking.
It used to be. I'm going to say it used to be. I remember when when I first was, fortunate to be listening to some of these banking conversations. It's not as bad now.
It's definitely not as bad, and this is not a UAE thing. This is a global problem in a sense that Trump spoke about it when he was inaugurated around the banking issues that crypto companies have in the US. The UK have it. So this is not a UAE or a Dubai specific thing, but it is difficult. And I think for me the biggest problem is it's not that the banks don't want to; it's more that the banks don't understand. And so I think what I was going to ask you was if you've painted this story for VARA. And they then go, I get that. Like, you've painted this perfect picture. I totally know what you're trying to do here. Does that then help when you go to the bank and you go, here's this painting we did for VARA? Does the bank then go, okay, I get it now because you've put this in a really nice way?
When I was at VARA, and I believe they still do today, a lot of kind of knowledge sharing with the banks. There's been a huge effort from day one to work with the banks and inform the banks of what they're doing, share the licensing process, the level of due diligence, the documentation. There's been a real kind of upskilling and collaboration from VARA and the banking industry's point of view, even with central bank as well at a federal level. There's been that kind of information sharing, and this is what we're doing and this is how we're doing it. So so when VASPs are going to banks, banks are aware of what the VASPs are presenting to them, essentially.
Process they've had to go through to get there.
I know a lot of the banks prefer you to have your approval to incorporate first because you're so early on in the process otherwise. But there are certain banks in the region that are pro virtual assets and are very much supportive of the ecosystem. And we're seeing the other local banks get up to speed.
That's good.
It's not a case of they didn't want to. It's just it's banking, it's traditional finance. To get something changed in a bank takes like 12 months minimum. Like I'm talking a normal process. You want to they want to launch a new type of bank account.
Absolutely.
Nothing's happening overnight.
No. And also, these banks, and I mean this in a positive way, they're making good money, doing what they do. Same I say with other professional services and all these different industries that you go, well, why aren't they getting into this crypto space? And it's like, well, actually, there's a huge risk to their business if they do it wrong, and especially for a bank. If a bank takes on a client and they haven't done the right due diligence and it goes wrong, it goes horribly wrong. And those
there's
fines
that reputational risk, isn't there?
Reputation. So, why would they take that risk if they don't have all the information? So, and like I say, I do know a few banks that, especially if there's a VARA license attached to the VASP, that they won't guarantee a bank account, but they will guarantee a conversation. They won't just say no automatically. So, it's good to hear that VARA have been working with the banks as well.
And even like now, my clients, I'm taking them through the process and we're doing banking introductions. There are much more warmer conversations today.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And interesting as well, you mentioned insurance, which I think a lot of people in this space wouldn't even think about, right? Because it's one of those things, I think, in personal and business where insurance is that thing that you buy and you leave in the cupboard and hope you never need, right? Obviously, if you do need it, you're pretty glad you got it. But that's an interesting piece because I guess, again, insurers, they're effectively insuring against a risk, right? So if they don't understand the risk they're insuring against,
it's quite difficult.
Yeah, it's very
difficult. So the number of
difficult.
Providers is not vast. We know of one provider from Hong Kong who has a reputation globally for insuring virtual asset service providers. They have a very solid background. So we're kind of working with them at the moment to understand the region and what they could do to support more VASPs in the region. So they have helped a number of licensees obtain insurance, etc. And there's a couple of players setting up in the region as well, but they're also going through their own licensing to get their insurance license and then be able to offer virtual asset insurance. So there are a few players, but there's not many, because again, like the banking industry, it's not as I think difficult to make change, but it's also understanding, okay, if we're going to offer this, what is it we're actually offering? What is the virtual asset activity? Is this VASP to be an exchange? Is it a broker dealer? Is it a lending borrowing? Is it an advisory service? What is it the VASP's doing? And then what is the insurance they actually need? And I think that's the whole piece. It's an education piece.
100%. And like I say, it's not just selling a service. No. It's insuring against a risk. So you need to know what that risk is in order to be able to put a value on. You need to
also understand what virtual assets are.
Absolutely, yeah.
So we touched on it very earlier when we were catching up about, lawyers. Everybody is being approached probably, can you help us get this license? But if the law firm don't understand virtual assets, crypto, they're going to be learning on the job with you, basically.
100%, yeah. And we have the same in the accounting space, especially in the UK from a tax perspective, when we deal with UK tax for individuals. And they've spoken to an accountant that's got a page on their website that says, we are crypto advisors, and they just have one page that's SEO'd up to the hills so that they can attract. And ultimately, they don't know what they're doing. So then the numbers that they get presented at the end are wrong. And that could lead in more tax being paid, for example, which is not what anyone wants. So it's the same in all industries. You need to understand what you're talking about in order to deliver on it. And crypto is one that, and you'll probably agree, I imagine, from 2022 when you didn't know very much about crypto to now. Once you know the space, it's quite a simple space to like once you get into it. But if you barrier to entry and that hurdle you got to get over at first is quite big. Yeah,
and also it's an ever evolving space. Yeah. So I don't know if you've seen this, but since I've been here in 2022, every kind of 3 to 6 months, the topic changes. Yeah. So the focus changes. When I first joined, when I first came to Dubai, everybody kept talking about NFTs and what are they and can I do this and can I do that? Now there's meme tokens. Then there's like real world assets has been a big thing. And I know like obviously then regulation comes out, but as quick as the topics change, it's not practical for the regulations to come out as quick. No. There's a lot of thinking and work that goes into developing a rule book per activity. Yeah. And also it's it's not just what the demand is, but what's the reason for regulating that activity. Is it reasonable?
Yeah.
Is it viable?
Yeah.
Yes, we want to regulate everything, but is that sensible?
Yeah, right? Absolutely. And I think I always push the narrative early on was like, you need to regulate, but don't stifle innovation, right? Yeah. And that is the key here: is how do you mix those two? And that's the perfect middle ground: is you get regulation, but without any stifling of the wonderful innovation that there is in this space.
And I think that was one of the things. Like I remember when we were first launching VARA, that was one of our key kind of messages. We're not here to stifle innovation. We're here to encourage it, but in a compliant way, because you can have innovation and regulation 100%. Together. Yeah. Right.
But I think the nice thing, about this part of the world, which is what I love about doing business in this part of the world, is that there isn't that old school mentality of this stuff I don't know about, so it must be bad, and therefore I have to come down super hard to like basically go too far to then come back, if you know what I mean. So basically tell everyone they're a criminal and then go, actually, okay, you might not be and you might not be, because that way is safer than actually going, let's assess everybody on their own merit, right? Which in the nicest way is what the SEC have done over the last 4 years in the US, is they basically just assumed all crypto people are bad and then kind of wound that back from there, and hopefully that will change. But and I personally think, I'm not an expert in the FCA, but I personally think the FCA are very similar in their mindset. Here it seems completely the opposite. Yeah. It seems like they want to regulate and they want innovation, but they want to do them both at the right time.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that is exactly the approach that I think Dubai has taken. Open door, assesses each player on its own merits, each VASP on its own activities, personnel, what are they bringing to the region, what are they bringing to Dubai, how are they part of the ecosystem. A lot is taken into consideration, but again, that key thing is we want innovation to continue. We're open for business. We want to continue to grow this space. It's here to stay.
And is there so this is kind of off topic a little bit, but we're talking about Dubai a lot here. Is there we mentioned ADGM earlier, which is the, I guess, I say financial regulator, but I guess they are in Abu Dhabi, right?
Yes.
Is there a battle between the two in terms of like ADGM want to license these guys, VARA want to
I don't think there's a battle. I think in the early stages, obviously, ADGM is a traditional finance regulator. So it's been in the UAE for a long time. It has established credibility. You have VARA was new and it was finding its feet and it was getting established. When it comes to virtual assets, everyone automatically thinks virtual assets, VARA.
Yeah.
When you think of ADGM, there are certain virtual asset activities that work really well hand in hand. So if you're setting up a fund and you're wanting to go for a management investment license, they have proven precedent and client VASPs, not VASPs, but clients that they've licensed. So there are certain activities that suit and fit the regulators really well. And I don't think there's a battle. I think they just both offer really different things.
Yeah, interesting.
The way they manage their ecosystems. Okay, you've got Hub 71.
Yeah.
You've got kind of the community here in One Central, Dubai, in DWTC Free Zone, and DMCC have their crypto tower, their innovation hub, their AI space now. So it's kind of like communities.
Yeah.
But as regulators, they're offering, essentially, they're both in the space.
Yeah.
But the thing is with ADGM is they're established from a regulated, financial regulated point of view. From a VA point of view, they're getting there. They're introducing more. So with DIFC, for example, we assume that it's a no VA space, but we have seen recently last year they launched their pilot scheme with Ripple. Ripple's an established regulated entity who's moving into the VA space, and they've also come on board. So yes, don't get me wrong, there's a commercial play for all of the regulators. They are businesses as well as regulators. And all the free zones.
Yeah.
Do I see free zones going a bit more gung-ho at it? Probably yes, right? We've got RACDAO now, who do not do any form of regulation. It is just a commercial free zone.
And that's sorry to jump in there. That's an interesting point, right? So let's just take three ADGM, let's say Dubai, and RACDAO, right?
Okay.
Is there ever a time you need all three? Or is there ever a time you need two of the three? Or and what if you go to RACDAO, for example, and they don't regulate you? Do you still need to then go to VARA, even though VARA's in Dubai and RAC's in...
So, okay, that's a really interesting question. From a business sense, it doesn't necessarily make sense to be in all three straight away. You've got to start your journey. If you're completely new to the region, you need to start your journey somewhere. If you know from day one what you're doing is a virtual asset regulated activity, then you start at VARA.
Okay.
If you're an established regulated entity in ADGM, you're a custody provider.
Yeah.
But you want to access the Dubai market.
Yeah.
We all know VARA offers, if you utilize one of the regulated entities as, say, your custody provider, there's an open ecosystem, there's that opportunity. Then you may then say, right, we've got our ADGM entity, we need to get to VARA so we can also become one of those preferred kind of licensed custody providers. That's where a business may then make that step.
Do they need to, though? Like, if they want to serve the Dubai market?
Yeah, essentially.
And they're in ADGM, technically. Yeah. And similarly with RACDAO, right? If you go to RACDAO and you're not regulated, you still can't then service the Dubai market, right?
Or you shouldn't be servicing anywhere in the UAE.
Yeah.
Because you're not regulated. With RACDAO is great for those providers that are not operating and are not doing anything VA activity specific yet. They're, say, working on a product, right? They might be in development, testing, getting their product ready. Fine. RACDAO's great for that early stage kind of development. But when you're like, right, we're like 6 months from, having this market ready, but what we're actually doing is, VA related, then you need to go and get your relevant regulated license. Yeah. So then, yes, you do have to have a commercial entity within Dubai. Yeah. If you're going to VARA, if you're going to ADGM, you've got to have your commercial entity and get yourself linked. It does depend. if somebody wanted all three, I'd really have to question why.
Yeah.
It'd be a sanity check as well, in full transparency.
Yeah.
As to why do you think you need all three?
Yeah.
Even we have clients come to us with really amazing projects and they're exciting, but we're often dealing with technology-minded people who have experienced a great growth through the virtual, with crypto, Bitcoin, etc. And they understand the technology, but they don't understand the regulatory space.
Yeah.
It's our job to kind of not remove excitement, but to bring everybody onto the same page. What is it you actually want to do? So like initially we saw a lot, especially when I moved into the consulting space, I need a VARA license. Okay, great. What is it you do? Yeah. Why do you need a VARA license?
Yeah.
And that's not because we're regulator agnostic essentially, but why do you need it? And 9 times out of 10, it's like a Nike. I want the best Nike trainers. I mean, but you do understand the level of work you need to do. Right? You're not paying for this license. There is work. There are people reviewing that application again and again and making sure you're compliant. Not only do you have to comply with the regulations, you then need to continue to comply with them, and you are supervised by the regulator. So it's really just being honest with them about the cost, the investment, the journey. A racked hours of commercial free zone, you will get your commercial entity license, you crack on and you do what you do.
Especially if you're, I say proprietary trader, but you're doing something, or like us as a service provider, even you guys, providing services into the space. Like you say, you don't need VARA for that, and so somewhere like RAC could work for that. But I think that's the interesting piece for me, because people assume that VARA. Sorry, let me rephrase that. A lot of people outside of the UAE assume that VARA covers the UAE, because when you talk about the UAE and you talk about Dubai, you quite often talk about them being the same thing, right?
Yeah.
And people forget or don't realise that actually there is a difference, that VARA is Dubai and there is a difference outside of... So
I don't know if you remember last year, VARA and ESCA signed the MOU.
Yes.
So that changes things slightly in that, so if you're being regulated by VARA, it's recognised by ESCA.
Fine.
Obviously, then you've got the ESCA bit, where if you're going to ESCA for a licence, the VARA element is still in play with it. ESCA is federal.
Yeah.
Central Bank is federal. VARA is Dubai. ADGM is Abu Dhabi. RAC is a commercial free zone in Ras Al Khaimah. DMCC, DWTC, Maidan, IFSA, they are all commercial free zones. And then you've got Dubai mainland.
Yeah.
They're all Dubai based.
Yeah.
Right? And this is where the confusion comes in. So you will have seen on my LinkedIn over the last kind of couple of weeks, I've been doing a mini educational series, just helping people like from a really simple point of view. And I do break my posts down deliberately into these kind of smaller bite sizes. Is who are you and what do you do?
Yeah.
So it's more easier to understand.
You did a table the other day. I really liked that.
Yeah.
I say I stole it. I didn't steal it.
But
it's
okay.
It's
there to be used.
I took it away so that I could then go, when I'm talking to a client, not advise them specifically, but I can have a high-level conversation with them and go, well, look, these are the different... If someone says, why do I need to go to VARA, for example? At least I've got a little bit of guidance. So I thought that was really good.
And I think that's the thing, and that is another reason as well, because I often have industry colleagues, they may be a consultant, they've not been in the VA space, but one of their clients has asked them, I want to get this license, can you help us? I often get a lot of requests for calls to kind of, can I give the high level overview? Happy to do a 30-minute quick snapshot, but then obviously capacity and things become a challenge. So I just wanted to kind of put something out there that people can just use as a go-to.
Absolutely.
And it is, right? It's there for everybody to consume and use as best practice, and hopefully it helps people along the way.
And like you say, I say you only want serious people, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but like if you can, and we're the same, if you can answer those questions with a simple LinkedIn post, simple article, something like that, that's also better for the consumer, so they don't have to, it's not trying to be me trying to be lazy and not want to talk. Like, it's actually very helpful for them, so they don't have to waste their time doing this and this. They can go, cool, okay, I fit there at this moment, so that's a route that I'm going to take.
And also we find as well, so when I was in KPMG, when I was part of VARA PwC, I used to find that people would not necessarily be able to consume what we are writing down in our amazing, beautiful PowerPoints. And it was, having been a teacher in a past life, realised that there's not a lot of information out there that's accessible to all learner types. So that is what I've designed my posts to be is accessible to all learner types.
I think
so something visual, kinesthetic learners, and just trying to making it consumable that they can actually understand it. And that's not a reflection on the space at all. It's just, it was the learning. And I was like, if I'm struggling and I'm reasonably brightish, I would probably then say, like, okay, there needs to be something more done. And one thing I was very passionate about and still am today is education in this space.
Same.
So next week, I'm part of an education series taking place with my colleague Suzanne. And it's about just helping compliance professionals understand the regulatory landscape in the region. Some of these individuals attending are either already in roles with virtual asset service providers or wanting to move from the traditional world to the VA space. So we're providing that knowledge and upskilling. Right now, there is not enough education in this space.
No,
some of the universities, I know Cambridge do some great work for the more professional side of things. There are some really great initiatives out there, but there are not enough right now. And that's not just from an academic point of view or a compliance point of view, but a general consumer point of view as well.
Yeah, and that's also, plugging myself here, but that's also what we're trying to do with this kind of podcast. I said to you before, we don't get, we're not Stephen Bartlett. We don't get 10 million views every day on our podcast, but we want to bring on guests that will add value. We want to bring on guests that we can post bits of information that give people those little bits of, snippets to really help guide. And we did a lot of educational work in the UK. We still do now, but I did a lot of it when I was there, but the team still do stuff now. And we also did a lot with accountants. We'd educate accountants on, the space and what they need to think about. And like you're educating compliance professionals, we would educate accountants on bits and pieces. So I totally agree. Education is key, and I think especially if you look at some of the, these things like take CZ and Binance, the issues that he had. There was BitMEX as well. They were a pretty big exchange that had AML issues early on. Like these companies, in my opinion, from what I've seen, weren't deliberately trying to flout the rules. Actually, a lot of the time, they didn't have the education to know what the rules they should have followed were. And part of that was the regulators didn't know in some places.
Exactly.
But also they themselves were probably, these entrepreneurial business owners, had all these great ideas, but didn't necessarily have that piece. And that's life. That is how life works. So we do need to educate, we do need to support, because we all want the industry to succeed, right?
Yeah,
so
100%.
I totally agree. So I want to touch just quickly on some tips and tricks that people might have, and by that, I'm not asking for before we go on to tips and tricks, what is the rough timescale at the moment for a license?
If we're specifically talking about VARA, within 12 months.
Okay.
But I'm going to caveat that really is dependent on how prepared the VASP is, how hands-on the VASP is. I know people assume the timeline is actually dictated by the regulator. To a degree, yes. But also it's really, really does depend on the VASP themselves. How responsive are they to the regulator? Do they take 6 weeks to reply to the regulator if the regulator sends an RFI? Are you running around like headless chickens trying to get your ducks lined up? There's an element of preparation to be done before you apply for your license. Basic things like a regulatory business plan, a business plan for your free zone. Commercial license is different to your regulatory business plan you're providing VARA with your first phase. You will be shocked at how many clients I've met that don't have that. They don't have it written down what it is they're doing, but they know what activity they want.
It totally makes sense.
And we do find sometimes when we get down the process, so we've done stage 1 and we were told there's all this great documentation. It's not there. So I think it really does depend on the VASP as well, their level of commitment, how much time they're allocating to this. I've noticed, and this is where we kind of come into play, is a lot of people do end up having a full-time job and doing this application, which can also be like a full-time job. So that's where we take away that stress. We take on a lot of the drafting and support with that creation of the initial policies and procedures in line with the VARA rule books. And I'm specifying VARA because that's what we're essentially talking about today. We work in line with the rule books. not only does that make that easier for the regulator when they're doing their due diligence, their referencing, their checking, it also means it's easier for the client to maintain, because the full honesty is we're there for a period of time and then we're kind of handing over. We do offer that supervisionary support and advisory, but that day-to-day then is not there.
No.
So we need to make this as easy for our clients and as easy for the regulator to be able to review, check, monitor what they're doing and update as they go along.
Yeah, it makes sense. So 12 months is a minimum, really. You can get it done in 12 months comfortably if you do what you're supposed to do.
Recently Token Vest, record timing, got their license, you know.
How long did that take them?
Scott will kill me if I say this wrong, so I'm not going to give a timeline, but it was very short.
But it was quick.
Pretty reasonable, yeah.
But it obviously can then take up to, I mean, as long as a piece of string in a sense, but 18 months, 2 years. But
also the regulator has now been very prescriptive, as in you get your approval to incorporate. There's now a deadline on you to make your first submission. Originally, when we first formed VARA, there wasn't those deadlines, but as time has gone on and more rigor and processes and have been put in place, there is now, look, guys, you've got X number of, you know, this is your deadline. Your first submission needs to be by then. Yeah. Because they are inundated. Everybody wants a VA license. They're all going to VARA.
Yeah, you've got to be serious.
You've got to be serious. If you're not, you're going to end up at the bottom of the pile.
And if you're not, if you're serious, you're going to want to get it done quickly.
Yeah, exactly.
If you're not serious, you're not going to care.
Yeah. So, and also with the seriousness angle, there's that element of being serious, but there's also a lot of spend a lot of time explaining to people when they say to me, but why do I have to do this? I say this often. It's like when my parents used to say to me, because I said so. Yeah. They're the regulator and they said so, and they have the full right to demand that of you.
And if you don't want to do it, don't come here. It is a bit like that, isn't it? Yeah.
And obviously, you know, look, you find a much nicer way of kind of saying that and be a bit more diplomatic. But essentially, this is where I've seen that whole thing of, oh, but we didn't have to submit this for this regulator or that regulator.
Yeah, it's irrelevant.
This is a virtual asset regulator. It's the globe's first one. Everybody is watching. Things have to be done right.
And also, it's like saying, you know, I had a job before and I didn't have to turn up at 9 o'clock. I turned up at 9:30.
Yeah.
But your job start time here is 9.
Yeah.
Yeah, but my last job I didn't have to. Yeah, but I don't care what. You know, you work for me now and they're my rules. So,
exactly.
My mum used to say to me, if you don't like my rules, don't live in my house.
Yeah.
Obviously, then I started to follow the rules and live in the house because I didn't want to be homeless at 14.
Yeah, exactly.
So
it's a similar kind of principle.
Yeah,
you know?
You're right. It's a good.
And it is a industry where, you know, regulation is still new, not just to the globe, but to companies who have been in this space a long time. So there's a lot of knowledge sharing, but upskilling. Yeah. Professionalism that needs to be applied when they are applying for their regulatory license. And it's about working with the regulator. Yeah. They're not against you. They're not the bad person. They're there to make sure you can operate, but operate compliantly. They have a duty to protect the consumers of Dubai at the end of the day.
Absolutely. But I also think, which people forget sometimes, like, if you're being regulated and you want to do things properly, they're also to protect you against people that don't want to do things properly, right? If you're a business that's taken the time and the money and the effort to go through a licensing process and be a legitimate business, then it's good that they're then going to stop somebody that isn't going to do that and might steal customers from you when they're not doing things properly. So I think there's that side as well, that they actually ultimately they
it
do
works
protect.
both ways.
Yeah. So let's just, I jumped away from this, but let's just jump into then, if you can, like any kind of, I say tips and tricks, but maybe some stuff that you've seen that, I know you've mentioned about documentation and stuff, but is there anything that you've seen that businesses maybe always get wrong or people forget, or those things that they can think about prior?
I think from a time point of view, they don't truly understand the level of time that is required. From them. And nothing can be done in a day. Yeah. So it's being realistic. There is a lot of patience and tenacity needed with any of the regulatory licenses you're going to go through. And they need to understand that true time element. Telling your C-level executives that you're going to get it in 6 months and you're sitting there 6 months having not done anything just adds more pressure to the business. Yeah. And the business will put pressure on you because they don't understand the true time element of getting a regulatory license. They need that license as a business, but they don't understand what's got to be invested in it. Yeah. So there's a time aspect from the process, how long it takes, time of what yours is going to be needed. And if clients are very honest with us and upfront and like, I have this much time, then we will then support them in that way. But if we don't know that up front, then we are assuming, there are a lot of assumptions made, but we do actually, we typical project manager, I have a RACI because I want to know what you're going to do and what we're going to do and how we're going to get you to the end goal. That sometimes really helps.
100%.
But yeah, time is definitely one of them. Cost is the second one. We've seen that VASPs typically really underestimate the level of investment needed.
Yeah.
So you've got your licensing fees payable to directly to the regulator, your supervision fees, which are paid to the regulator. So the licensing fees with VARA are paid in two parts. You pay just before you're advised you're going to get your approval to incorporate, you pay 50%. 50% are payable upon notice that you're going to be operational, license is going to be issued. And then your supervisionary fee is also paid at that time annually. The supervision fee is an annual fee starting at 200,000 dirhams per annum. And that is an annual fee that's payable. You then have your commercial entity license, free zone license. Depending on which free zone you go with and what arrangement you select, you will have your office cost. Then you get a number of visas allocated. But if you need additional visas, there's things like that to take into account. And then the hiring of your key personnel. Hiring we're in a very candidate-dominated market right now, but finding the right candidate, you need to make that investment. If you've got networks and you're linked, okay, fine. But there's only so much. You're still going to have to sit through 20, 30 interviews. Yeah. You're still going to have to sift through all the CVs. You're still going to have to. So if you are onboarding a recruitment partner like Cander Group, DMCC,
you guys can come in,
you need to really understand that investment. It is an investment you're making. They're taking away so many hours of work from you. They're doing all that due diligence. Jack from Cander Group, DMCC, who really supports me on my projects, has a really good kind of network of strong governance, risk, compliance people that he can help put into the right roles in the right companies. So there's that investment as well, is those recruitment fees and paying those fees at the end of the day. So there's a lot of, we offer different models to support the VASP through that process. The cost of your bank accounts, at the end of the day, there's fees payable for those. You're onboarding a audit partner, insurance, paid up capital as well. So
what is the paid up capital?
It can vary depending on kind of the size.
So in reality, we're looking at a minimum really of $200,000 here.
I'd say safely you should be having like 1 million USD, to make the full end-to-end investment.
Okay, including the paid up capital and
correct, yeah.
So $1 million really is.
Yeah, we've supported clients that are perhaps a little bit under that, but ultimately, it does not serve me right to take a client through a process knowing full well they don't have the money,
the capital to
right?
Do it,
Because VARA are going to ask about the financials. It's a key part of understanding how stable are they as a financial institution. And they will go through that level of due diligence and want to understand where are you at. And that's where you see the accounting.
We're going through that with someone, a VARA license application at the moment where, and part of that process is we've got to do some kind of worst case scenarios. What if all the customers leave tomorrow and they don't have any revenue? Who's going to fund? Who's going to make up the capital requirements? And, all these different bits and pieces. So you're right, VARA aren't just accepting a 5-line, revenue, costs, profit, like that. That's not gonna lie. It's a full financial plan and forecast for your business to show that you can survive even bear markets and all these sorts of things.
And the consumers are protected then as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
So there's the finance element, so time, cost, and then I think this is not something that you can put little effort into it and hope VARA say yes to it. So the drafting element is quite key. Copy and pasting is not a thing.
ChatGPT?
No. And I've learned that myself, actually, with some of the research I've done in my role as well, how inaccurate it is.
ChatGPT can't do my VARA license.
No. One of my colleagues, I had her sense check some of my writing recently, and she was like, ChatGPT or Jappy. I always get it the wrong way. But I was like, good call out, right? And it's good to know that there are people out there who actually can see the difference. Sometimes we all think the cheaper the help, the quicker we get to market, the better it's going to be. Not true.
Yeah.
Because you are then sometimes having to redo that work yourself. So then you've got your time and cost implication there. You've also got it's not done right. So trying to undo and then redo someone else's work is going to cost you more.
Yeah, true.
At the end of the day. So I appreciate budgets and you want to get your money's worth and stuff like that, but you really need to think about, you're engaged with your consultancy partner for nearly 12 months, if not longer. You're spending a lot of time with them, right? So you want to make sure that you're picking the right fit for you, your company, but you also want to know that what you're getting is quality. So things like reference checking is quite good, talking to people who have worked with them before, asking about referrals, asking about previous licensing experiences and applications. And I say that across the board, not just from myself as a licensing compliance support, but also accounting, recruitment, etc. Look at the holistic picture of what you're getting. What you invest is what you're going to get back out.
100%. And also characters. Sometimes one character is better. I'd say better. It's not the right. Sometimes you fit better with one character than another character. That doesn't mean that one's better than the other technically. They might both be as technically
We have
sound.
like in the past, like when we've engaged with clients initially and understood, sometimes we're not the right fit for them.
Yeah, we've had that.
Where I'm not the right person for them to be working with. So I found them someone else, or I've recommended someone else who I think would work better with them. And I'm always happy to do that, right? I understand this space is challenging and you just don't want to keep getting closed doors. You want it to be a more open. So it takes me 2 seconds to send a WhatsApp or an email, so if I can just quickly help you with it, fine.
Yeah, absolutely.
Not a problem. If I'm not the right person for you, let me talk to my colleagues in the industry who I know are great. Let me put you in touch with them.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. I think we've covered a significant amount on this. And there's a lot of value in what you've said, and I think personally, and I'm not just saying this now because you're here, but any VASP or virtual asset provider that wants to get into the space here should be talking to you guys, in my opinion. So, on that note, where can people find you? And we'll link stuff in the show notes. But where can people find you?
So I'm on LinkedIn. Yeah. I'm all over that at least once or twice a week. There's something coming out from me, and email and WhatsApp as well. And I've also got on my LinkedIn profile, if you just want to have a chat, you want to talk through kind of the journey, etc., you're welcome to just go ahead and book a call in my calendar. It's fully accessible from there. Joe, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Much appreciated.
Thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.